Welcome to the Haven Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders, owners, and professionals are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Hear from industry experts on everything from marketing, leadership, financing, and more. Brought to you by Haven, a co-working space where you can connect, create, and get stuff done.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Haven Hubcast. I'm Nancy Sheed, your host, and I am very, very, very happy, honored, thrilled to be here with Heather K. Terry, who is a returning guest on the Haven Hubcast. Welcome, Heather. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me again, Nancy. This is so exciting to make a second appearance on a podcast. I feel like I just made a big life accomplishment or something.
So appearing for the second time on the Haven Hubcast is Heather K. Terry. For those of you who might not have listened to our first episode, which we'll put in the show notes, Heather is the founder and CEO of GoodSam Foods, which is a public benefit corporation. She's also been a CPG mentor and an angel investor. She has an amazing story from sort of her life from Broadway to Wall Street, but we're going to jump ahead and sort of fast forward to when we last spoke 2 years ago. Heather, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit more about GoodSam Foods, because I think that's going to help set the stage for what's been going on with you for the past 2 years.
Yeah. So first and foremost, GoodSam makes a lot of products that we all enjoy on a pretty regular basis. Coffee, chocolate, nuts, fruits, seeds, oils. You know, we do a lot of macadamia nuts, which I know a lot of people around Haven get a lot. And we work in solely regenerative supply chains, which is why we cross so many categories, because if we believe in regenerative agriculture, then we have to believe in taking many, many products from those farmers. Otherwise, we get forced into a monoculture, a one thing. And we work directly with those farmers. So there are no middlemen in our supply chain, which means the farmers make more money, we make more money, we're able to get the product on the shelf at a more equitable price across the board. So that's really at the root of everything we do. But I like to always say that if you open your pantry, you are buying something that is a GoodSam product or something like a GoodSam product, and you should definitely be buying our products.
I love that. That is like the tagline right to it. You mentioned working with farmers. Can you talk a little bit about where those farmers are? Because seeing you sit in your office today is not a usual place we get to see you.
No, it's not. If any of you follow me on social media, it's usually not the place that you see me in. But we work primarily in Colombia and Kenya, but we have projects now in Bolivia, Mexico, and Ghana. So we're expanding. We're sort of keeping those 5 countries as our place that we're staying for the moment as we grow as a company, but that's where we're centrally focused.
Okay. And that has changed since we spoke 2 years ago, right? You were just sort of like much more solely focused, just getting started. Like that's a big change from 2 years ago.
Yeah. And I think even when we spoke 2 years ago, Nancy, we weren't even really sure about Kenya at that point. We were trying something there. We were not sure if it was going to work. It was the middle of the pandemic. We had found a partner that we thought was viable. We have employees in Africa. And so sending them to those farms was really, really challenging at the time. And so it was a blind leap of faith. And we did as much vetting as we could. And then getting into that supply chain, it was mid 2020. I think we finally got into that supply chain where we could travel. I can't even tell you how many PCR tests I took in 2020 and 2021 and the beginning of 2022. It would probably be completely embarrassing to admit how many PCR tests I took in that amount of time just to get in and out of the places that we work. So a lot of people saw us traveling during the pandemic, but a lot of people don't realize that we pulled a lot of travel because of the pandemic too. So we were at one point in Colombia and it was Omicron beginning of 2022. And we did not deem it safe. That particular strain was moving very, very quickly in Colombia, and the numbers were just getting insurmountable. We were very shocked, having looked at the reports, being in JFK and then getting to Bogota and seeing a massive, massive spike. And so we did cancel a lot of time in the interest, especially of our indigenous communities that do not either have access to vaccines or because of their ancestral the way that they live their lives, their ancestral promises, the way that their society functions do not bring vaccinations into their communities. Because they're very isolated and remote, we chose not to go in at specific times and then recircled back around. So it was a very challenging time to do business like this, but we made it happen and we were very careful and safe about it.
And you kind of started addressing how do you find these? I'm kind of diving into your operations before we get to sort of what's happening back here. But you mentioned you have employees sort of on the ground in these countries. How does that work? I'm just picturing, does somebody just stroll up to an indigenous farmer and knock on the door and say, hey, we've got this company, what is that? And I'm sure it's different in every country with every farm, but are you trained for that? Is it serendipitous? What does that look like?
I think Colombia was an interesting place to start just because it was so untouched in a lot of ways. I mean, yes, we buy a lot of things from Colombia, most notably coffee as Americans, right? We know about Colombian coffee. And we think of Colombia in two ways in America. We think of it about coffee and we think about it drugs, and that's it, right? And that's, that's our limited view of what that country has to offer. Colombia is actually the second most biodiverse country in the world, only second to Brazil, which is 10 times larger. And that's fascinating, right? So there's a lot happening in that country that I think as Americans or Westerners or, more developed countries don't really think about. Now, of course, there are other industries and other people acting in those places, just maybe very, very quietly. And we're one that is there and we're a little bit louder about what we do. And we're a little bit more focused on how we do it and why we do it, I think, than a lot of other businesses. We're very careful about the fact, look, we are taking something out of that system, but as much as we're taking out of that system, as much as we're extracting out of that system, we try to replace back into that system in various ways. So it's a little bit of a different business model in that we don't just show up and say, hey, we're going to buy all this stuff from you and see ya in a couple of years. We're there really regularly. I spent about 3 full months in the country of Colombia in 2022 on the ground, in and out. And that is because we're running a lot of programs, we're developing a lot of trust, we're strategizing with our farming communities, our associations, our co-manufacturers to make sure that they can keep up with our growth. Our business is only as strong as those farming businesses. And I think that's what a lot of food entrepreneurs don't really think about. We thought last year in 2022, oh my God, there's all these supply chain problems. Well, why are there supply chain problems, right? The supply chain problems that GoodSam had are very different than a traditional CPG company. And I can speak to that because I've lived in a traditional CPG company as a startup where I did something out of my kitchen. I was buying through third parties. Everything was coming in piecemeal. And then we were creating a product stateside. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just very disconnected from the reality of what's happening. So at GoodSam, our problems weren't with the farming communities. They weren't with getting the actual product. It was the shipping of that product. It was packaging substrate, which was a global problem at the time last year because the zero COVID policy forced a lot of factories in China in particular, where we all rely on packaging substrate to come from. It put a tremendous amount of pressure in the places where substrate was being produced that wasn't China. Right. So all of these things snowballed. GoodSam saw them through a different lens, and we were still able to grow in 2022 versus a lot of other food businesses that remained flat because they couldn't even get material to produce the product. We were just able to pull a lot more levers than most companies were. And that's because we're really changing the way that food companies do business. That's part of our business model.
I feel like I just got an education as well in regenerative. Do we say regenerative farming, regenerative food? What you said it earlier, and I was like,
regenerative can be applied to many, many different things, but regenerative is sort of the idea that things can regenerate, and we can apply that to many different principles in and on the planet, right? When we talk about it from a food perspective, we're talking about it from a farming perspective, and we're talking about finite versus infinite. Regeneration is an infinite principle. It is completely circular. It's the idea that we can improve outcomes. We can grow those improved outcomes. We can actually allow the soil and the land to produce a lot more and be a lot healthier than just prioritizing one thing, which is profit, and keeping it in a finite system, which is why we're having all these problems with monocrops right now. We have unproductive land. We have really serious, especially in the United States, our farmers have a serious dependency on the farm bill and on subsidies, right? This is not what we want. That's a very finite way of looking at farming. Agriculture was put onto that finite path during the agricultural revolution, right? And we've not been able to revamp it. But regenerative agriculture is not a new concept. This is something indigenous people and smallholder farmers without a lot of access have been practicing for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Right. So when I show up on a farm and I'm like, oh my God, this is regenerative. The first time, especially I did that, the farmers looked at me like I had 15 eyeballs. I was with Jeremiah McElwee from Thrive Market and he and I were like, oh my God. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is just what we've always done because we don't have access to chemicals. We don't have access to machinery. We don't have access to all of these things that are harming. And by the way, we don't believe in them. Right? We don't believe that that's the way that we get to any positive outcome. And so we've chosen or been forced into this more holistic way of farming. And I think we're pretending right now in the United States like we came up with this. But we didn't. Is actually like what farming was before it was just a cornfield that was just filled with corn, right? That was something we created. That's not actually how crops grow. Crops grow better when there are multiple products growing alongside one another, right? We get better outcomes. We get better nutritional outcomes. We get better output incomes. We get, and I know there are people who are going to write in and be like, we don't know that that's true. Okay, well, we don't also know that that's not true. And I would argue that anything that works in symbiosis with nature is going to have a more positive outcome, right?
Right. Yeah. And I feel like this is thank you for the backstory. And it seems to go along with a lot of other narratives in terms of what Americans say they did first. And,
yes.
Or Americans wanting to get credit for, or let's just say the developed nations wanting to get credit for. When
I'm not popular. I'm not popular for that view in the industry. Right. I'm not popular for pointing out that we are colonializing the regenerative food system, which is exactly what we're doing. We're taking ownership of something that truly doesn't belong to us instead of elevating and amplifying indigenous people, smallholder farmers, the people who have really been holding on to this knowledge for a very long period of time while we have worked in a very extractive system. And I am guilty of that in previous companies by working through brokers and middlemen and all of that. Every big company that you think is good right now, I'm not going to name names, but their history is not rooted in this. These are new concepts for them as older companies, right? So we have to acknowledge that at least as business owners, as people, as consumers, right? And that's okay. We can have that humility. We can be humble and say, we were doing it this way because that made sense at the time, but we now understand that this is the path. But to paint it as if this was our idea, or this was something that we magically came up with, or we somehow saw the light. That's not really what happened, right? Yeah. So let's just be honest about that and accept it and say, we're willing to do better. We now see what is possible.
Yeah. That's a great segue into, I think, the more popular term, whether it's actually being implemented or just talked about, of sustainability, right? So, that's been a buzzword. And it's more than a buzzword. I don't mean to treat it so lightly. But that bigger umbrella of sustainability, which is in the part of ESG, right? But I think to your point, I love that you've come literally and figuratively from the ground up in explaining what sustainability looks like, why it's important from a business standpoint, from a farming standpoint, from a life standpoint. But what's changed? And again, a lot has changed in this space in the past 2 years, right? Like, we now have investors arguing about whether investing in sustainability is good or bad, and how do you measure it? So
and look, I'm gonna right there. I just want to interject because the ones who say it's bad, I call your bullshit. Okay, why? Why do I call your bullshit? And yes, I'm cursing on the Haven Hubcast podcast.
I'm making notes that this goes in the audiogram. So kid yourself. This is going to be like,
but I call your bullshit. Sustainability is a business decision. There are better business outcomes because of sustainability long term. And I will challenge anybody who wants to say that this does not improve the top line long term. If you are only focused on the short term, great, I'll give you that. I'll concede that to you. You want short term? You want short term that's never going to get you anywhere, that could potentially put your business, no matter how big, no matter how small, in massive jeopardy? Great, I'll give you that. You can do short term things that are very destructive, very extractive, and they will get you somewhere in the short term. But in the long term, you will fail. That is just math. Okay. I'm really going to challenge anybody out there who's buying into this narrative that sustainability is not good for your business long term. I call you on that. I will challenge you to a debate any day of the week.
I think we need you and the head of Vanguard going toe to toe. That's what I'm thinking. We need you going toe to toe, and my money's on Heather.
Yeah, if he's just focused on the next 12 months, I guess, like great business case. But what happens to your shareholders 12 months from now? 24 months from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you will fail.
And taking that passion and deep-seated belief, which I think inherently we all know, if you just think conceptually of like, am I leaving this earth a better place? Like, has my role on this earth been leaving it a better place? It totally makes sense. How, Heather, with your passion and what GoodSam Foods is doing, how are you also then educating people in terms of, like we just talked about, this kind of either the investing standpoint or doing good business standpoint, or getting people on board with kind of this? It shouldn't be a shift, but it is a big shift. I know you're active in educating investors. So can you talk about what that looks like, which it's not necessarily a different hat for you, but it's another role that you're playing?
Yeah. So I think, look, I love humans. We're so basic. We just want it to be one way or the other. I mean, it's just shocking, right? Even in the investment landscape right now, I laugh at investors and I love them all. Everybody I'm talking to, this is not a jab, but it is kind of a jab, right? In the sense that everyone right now wants to talk about how there's no money, but yet I'm hearing about founders being funded. And yet I've taken checks. And yet, there's exceptions all over the place. So like, we want this neat story about it all the time. We want these like tied up stories about it. Like, this is the way it is, and this is the way it must be done. But when has anything great ever come from that? Never. You look at stories like Apple, you look at like big success stories like that. And the reason that investors were successful with Apple is because they took a shot on a dream, on a vision, because that's all it really was. There was no quantifiable result that was really, really there, right? There was a visionary there. There was an idea. And no matter what the financial landscape is, there is money out there to be had, right? Yep. Investors out there who are limiting themselves to that are going to lose long term. I think that the investment landscape is coming to a reckoning, right? If we can't fund sustainable businesses, if we can't look at metrics in a more healthy way, we just came off of a huge period of time where we were offering these super inflated valuations. I mean, I've been in and out of being a founder for a long time. I've worked with a lot of founders too. I've funded a lot of founders throughout the course of my career. And I have never seen what the last 5 years were before this 2022, like kind of bubble burst in the startup world. And, it's just because everybody was doing the same thing they're doing now, but in the opposite swing. Oh my God, I must get in on all these great deals. And like, let's give them a 10 times valuation because we're going to make millions of dollars. It's like, when you go one way or the other, right? It's like when you hear Warren Buffett speak, right? He's always just like, slow and steady. Slow and steady. And that's why he has won as an investor, because he never changes course. He understands the pendulum swings in the market. He understands the pendulum swings due to politics and government and all of those things, right? But investors, like, for as many times as they hear him speak, for as many times as they hear people like him speak, or they see very successful people who do this, the most successful of all of us are not the ones who go one way or the other way. They're the ones that stay straight down the middle and understand the reality of the situation, that there's always good ideas and there's always money. And how you look at that, right? If you get into that anything in excess is bad, right? I remember, we talk about sugar and the excess, but like I remember this New York Times article, and I could totally be quoting this inaccurately because it was such a long time ago, but I remember a New York Times article, and maybe somebody out there can find it, on this woman who found out that bok choy, there were like all these virtues of bok choy. And so all she started doing was eating bok choy, and like she died or something. And it's like as humans, we're so limited. It's like, I got to go all in or I got to go all out, and really it's those of us that stay in the middle, creating healthy businesses, creating healthy economic environments, investing steadily, regularly, with intention, with guidance, with guardrails, with really communicating with the founders that we invest in. Those are the ones that win, not the ones that are operating on both sides of the spectrum, right? Because nothing good ever comes of that, right? Bok choy or, I don't know, Snickers bars,
exactly.
All day you're not going to win in either scenario.
I can take both of those and be very happy.
Guess what, Nancy? In this investment landscape, you're not going to win in either of those either. We just saw what happens when you get too high on the hog. And now there's so many pocketbooks that are clamming up, and you're not going to win in that either.
Yeah.
So middle.
I was just at a founders conference, and they're like, if you can't show that you're going to make money really fast. And I thought, you should have been able to show how you were making money sooner for the past 10 years, but like, profit, that's actually important. Like, right. Yeah. I mean, to your point, like, it was like, it's really hard to get money. It's really hard to get money. And that's,
yeah. And we, by the way, as founders, we tell that narrative to ourselves, right? So it's like, yes, the investment community has clammed up 100%, and that's wrong. But as founders, we're buying into that story. And so when we walk into rooms, right, from a psychological perspective, we're telling ourselves the story of like, oh, this is really hard. I'm never going to get this done. Oh my God, there's no money out there. There's no money. So if you tell yourself that story over and over and over again, how hard it is, how there's nothing out there, how there's all this lack, how there's all this, how are you going to show up in that room?
Yeah.
And if you're an investor and you keep telling yourself there's no money, we can't invest in anything, why are you even taking a meeting with me? Then don't take any meetings. Yeah. Don't take a meeting with me if you aren't really prepared to have an intelligent conversation about a business that is growing, right? Because I've had plenty of these conversations where they've clamped up. GoodSam is growing, right? We have revenues. We've growing revenues. We grew 21 to 22 now to 23, right? And so when investors come to us and say them like, I'm like, then don't take a meeting with people like me, because you're just wasting my time.
And I also think there's not, you've said this before, there's not one way, right? Like going in and only saying like, it could be a strategic partnership. It could, you know what I mean? Just going in with the like, give us cash, let it look like this. It depends on your stage. But I think there's also a lot of opportunity for creative collaborating in this space that maybe we didn't have to have 2 or 3 years ago, when it was like, walk in, do the dog and pony show, get your pitch, here's your check. Let's, I think it's actually challenging both sides to be a little more creative. And it's something I feel like you've been doing from day one, right?
And Nancy, did it ever happen for women where we just showed up and did the pitch and got the check? I mean,
I know.
It happened one time to me. And you know who funded me? And it was in GoodSam. You know who funded me?
Another woman?
One time, a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So a woman who didn't even hear me do my entire pitch, but heard me speak to what it is that we do and wrote me a check, a big one too, right? That's someone who is, and she knew from the community that had brought me in that I was a safe bet because they had done a lot of due diligence, but she didn't even think twice, right?
Right.
I'm not saying to be irresponsible as an investor, but I'm also saying like you have a lot of different options, and you have really green founders and you have really experienced founders, and you've got to weigh what it is and how it is that you're doing it. But to buy into this narrative on both sides of the table, either as a founder or an investor, that there is no possibility right now, that's just ridiculous. The economy is still the economy. There are people still going into stores buying things. Yeah. Like that's not changing. So like get with the program, everybody. Like founders, go in and own your shit, own your stuff, say, I'm here. This is what we've done. This is how well we do it. And this is why you should fund me, and be confident in that. And investors, take those meetings when you know there is a possibility that you are really interested. Or say, this is just a pipeline call. We're not deploying. I have mad respect for a group here in Connecticut who said to me recently, like, hey, we want to talk to you because A, we think we can introduce you to a bunch of people. And we have some angels within our partnership who do checks, and we invest very squarely in what you do, but the fund is not deploying capital right now.
But you knew what you were getting.
That's an awesome conversation, right? I'm like, okay, great. Like now I know that I just want to know you guys because you have a ton of integrity. You're being honest with me. You are passionate about the same things that I'm passionate about. And like, maybe there's something down the road with the fund piece, but there's all these other people who can introduce me to all these other people. So, I think right now we've all got to have like a little bit of a reality check around this piece.
I love how you've taken our conversation from being in the founder role to being, advising in the investor role. So in terms of that, and you, as you said yourself, you have been an investor. You mentioned green investors. Can you talk a little bit about or share how you're helping actually educate people who are new to this, either the angel investing world or the getting into more sustainable investing? What advice are you sharing? And I know you're doing that in your world in general, but I also know you're bringing that to Haven. So it's a gift as well because you've seen both sides.
Yeah. So I think with investors, so we get a lot of people who are new to the angel investing world, which is so ironic in this time period. Nobody has money, quote unquote, but I have people who are like, I want to write you a check and I'm not an accredited investor, or I've never done this before, or I just sold a property and I'd rather put it into a company. It's like shocking how many of those we're getting on a regular basis. So I think the big thing is like, obviously with those people, I'm just educating them like, okay, this is what a term sheet is. This is what a convertible note is. This is what a priced equity round is. This is how this all relates, right? And so I have like sort of a very succinct, short pitch that gets them straight to the point. And they're like, oh, wow. Okay. It connects the dots very, very quickly for them. So I think like anybody who's trying to do that kind of stuff, just talk to people. Don't be worried that you don't know what you don't know. Don't be scared because otherwise you may miss some really great opportunities to work with some really amazing companies and to put capital into the landscape, it's really needed right now. So I'd say, don't be afraid of what you don't know and just ask questions. And on the founder side, I often get founders calling me to just say like, look, you've done this before. I know you're still like, you have another startup, but you've done, I raised capital in 2008, 2009 during the last recession. And that was a real recession. Yeah. Right. It was a real recession. And we raised money. And by the way, we raised money in a time where the company was barely anything. I think the first time we raised capital, Nancy, at Nibmore, we were like $150,000 in revenue. We were zero. We were nothing. It was so tiny. And like to look at what we're doing at GoodSam now and to think of the investment landscape is sort of ridiculous, where I'm just sitting here going like, come on, guys, like this is this should be a no-brainer. Like what are you doing? And because here's what's going to happen. We're going to have this period of time, and this is another educational point for investors. We're going to have this period of time. You're all going to clam up. Great ideas like GoodSam, great functioning companies like GoodSam are going to get the money wherever we need it. We're going to scramble it together, however we need to scramble it together. And then in a year, you're going to come to me wanting to write a check, and I'm not going to need your money anymore.
Right.
So like really think intentionally. So, I think having the investment community has a really difficult time, I think, having vulnerable conversations. And humility and vulnerability are things that on the founder side are really important and on the investment side are really important. We're all scared to a certain degree. We're scared about a lot of different things. And founders are much more prone to coming out into the world and be like, oh my God, I'm terrified. I'm going to do like an Instagram live. I'm going to do a podcast about how terrified I am, blah, 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 blah. And investors are like the exact opposite. They're like, well, it just is what it is. And like, we're just going to, and you can literally see the clamming up. It's just like this, Nancy, I'm putting my sweater around my neck. They're like, no.
And you will not get money from us.
You will not get money from us. Like, let me set your expectations. And they're both wrong. They're both wrong. Because when you go to the super emotional place or you go to the super clammed up place, again, you're on that pendulum. You're on opposite sides of the pendulum. And when you do that, you miss everything
Yeah.
that is possible, right? Because you're making a decision on both sides. And that goes for every time period, right? Even in good times, you may be missing something because you're thinking of it so narrowly, or you're thinking it so much from the position that you're in, right?
Yeah.
Versus looking at it as something bigger, or looking into the investment landscape from both the founder side and the investor side with like, there are issues here right now. So how can I get creative? What can I creatively do as a founder? What can I creatively do as an investor that allows money to continue to flow out, but where we're just maybe thinking about things differently, right? So, and then for those of you in the middle that are just trying to write checks for the first time or the third time, or you're still really new, just talk to a lot of people. There are some really, really great people out there, especially in the Haven community, who are so honest. I mean, I remember, and Felicia Rubenstein, who runs Haven, when she's one of the investment groups that came to invest in GoodSam. And she came to me before that and she's like, okay, we have some questions. And I was like, great, ask me all your questions. And I answered all her questions.
Right.
She was just like, I want to know about this and this. And then she asked me one question that her husband asked. And I was like, oh, damn, that's a good question. And I don't know the answer. I need to go back to my team and think about how to answer you the right way. It takes that type of humility, humbleness, vulnerability to just admit what we don't know to each other and say, if we're going to be partners, right? Because that's really what an investor-founder relationship is. It's a partnership. Of investor-company relationship is a partnership. It's okay. It's okay to say, I don't know, or we have to figure that out, or like, wow, what a great question. We had never considered that. That shouldn't be a blemish on your scorecard on either side, right? It should be celebrated that you're coming into a partnership and you have something to offer one another.
Yeah. Back to the creative collaboration as opposed to exchange and transaction. I love it. And thank you for bringing in Haven. Heather, I could talk to you for another half an hour. For people who want to learn more, and thank you for, again, I just love how you've brought it's not one side or the other. There are two sides, but ultimately we're all kind of in this together. For people who are interested in learning more about you or GoodSam's or investing, what's the best way to reach you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Heather K. Terry. Or you can go to our company website at GoodSamFoods.com. Go there, buy many things. Your pantry will thank you. And your family will thank you.
And the world will thank you. The farmers will thank you.
Your friends, your charcuterie board, whatever you've got going, will thank you. Yeah, no, so I'm always happy to be of service to anybody out there, whether it be through the products that we put into the marketplace, all the way through having deep conversations. So
I love it. Well, thank you for coming back for another deep conversation. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Anytime, Nancy. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Haven Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders and owners are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Haven is a co-working space and virtual community located in the heart of Fairfield County, Connecticut. Haven is a hub for business owners and professionals to connect, create, and get stuff done. Find out more about the Haven community online at haven.com. That's HAYVN.com. Haven Hubcast is produced by Sound Advice Strategies.